The Green Bay Packers, they had a typical Green Bay Packers year. They were amazing in the regular season, and it finally looked like their year to win it all. But of course, they'd end it how they always do, losing in the NFC Championship game. And in today's video, let's talk about what's next for this team and what they can do to improve in the offseason. Before we do get started though, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel. Also, subscribe if you guys are new so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we're on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I will do a reaction to my first 2 videos ever, plus a Q&A. And the shout out for today's video goes to Sportsmania. Make sure you guys go ahead and check him out. The link to his channel is in the description below. But with that being said, let's get this video started. And I want to start out by talking about the Packers roster. And Aaron Rodgers is the first player I want to talk about. And Aaron Rodgers, what can I really say? I mean, he was amazing in 2020. He won the MVP award, and he's obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. This past year, he had 4,299 passing yards, 48 passing touchdowns, and completed 71% of his passes. Up next, let's talk about Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is he's a really good running back. I mean, the guy is not he's not like the elite tier and all, but he's still pretty good. He's a good runner, and he's also a pretty good receiving back. He had 1,104 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, and averaged 5.5 yards a carry. Along with that, he had 335 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Davante Adams is the next player I want to talk about. And Davante Adams, what can I really say? Just like Aaron Rodgers, he is flat out amazing, and he had a great year. He is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. He had 1,374 yards and 18 touchdowns this past year. Up next, let's talk about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the guy is not some elite receiver, and the guy does have issues when it comes to dropping the ball, but he is still a pretty solid player, I would say. He had 690 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns this past season. Robert Tonyan is the next player I want to talk about, and Robert Tonyan, he had a great year this past season. I mean, the guy was he was really good. He had 586 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns this past year. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, I want to talk about Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark is a pretty decent player, but the guy did have a down year as he only had 2 sacks and 12 pressures this past season. Preston Smith is the next player I want to talk about, and Preston Smith did not have a year like how he did in 2019, but even then, he's still a really solid and I'd say a pretty decent player. He had 4 sacks and 3 passes defended, along with 16 pressures. Rashawn Gary is the next player I want to talk about, and Rashawn Gary, he actually had a pretty decent year with 5 sacks and 19 pressures. Up next, let's talk about Za'Darius Smith. Za'Darius Smith had a really good year and is pretty underrated in my opinion. He is not in the TJ Watt or Khalil Mack or Aaron Donald tier when it comes to pass rushers, but he is still a really good player. He had 12.5 sacks and 4 forced fumbles, along with that 39 pressures. Jaire Alexander is the next player I want to talk about, and Jaire Alexander, he had an amazing year. He is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, and he had 1 interception and 13 passes defended this past season. Up next, let's talk about Darnell Savage. Darnell Savage had a really good year and was a very big part of this Packers secondary. He had 4 interceptions and 12 passes defended this past season. And to wrap up the roster, let's talk about Adrian Amos. Adrian Amos is one of my favorite players in the NFL. I mean, I really like the guy a lot. He is one of the best safeties in the NFL, and he had 2 interceptions and 9 passes defended this past season. Now, the Packers, they obviously have a great team. They really do. There's a reason why they went 13-3, claimed the 1 seed in the NFC, and there's a reason why they did make it to the NFC Championship game, and why many people thought they could have won the Super Bowl this year. But, of course, they do have their weaknesses. First off, can both sides of the ball just play good at the same time in the NFC Championship game or in the playoffs? Because seriously, I mean, that is a really big part of why they can just never get over the hump. But going over to like the team issues, for one, they definitely can use an upgrade when it comes to their pass rush. I mean, first off, Preston Smith, just play better. I mean, you have a massive contract and you gotta live up to that expectations. I mean, I'm not saying he has to be like a 17 sack player, but I really do think Preston Smith can play better, like having like 8.5 sacks maybe. And the pass rush, like a lot of their key players do need him. They just gotta play better, and hopefully Rashan Gary can maybe develop into a really capable pass rushers. That would be really good for this unit, but they can also look to free agency and other options to help improve that unit. Of course, more on that later. Not only that, but as the thumbnail says, they need a number 2 receiver, okay? Davante Adams is amazing, and I do think Allen Lazard is pretty solid, and so is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but in my opinion, those guys are not number 2 receivers, okay? They would make a great number 3. But Davante Adams can't cover the whole field, and Robert Tonyan, he's pretty good, but they need a number 2 receiver, okay? Because when Davante Adams is shut down, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, who knows? I mean, you can't exactly like throw it to Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling and get a guaranteed catch from them, okay? They need to get a number 2 receiver next to Davante Adams, and the Green Bay has to be aggressive in free agency and the draft this year, okay? They must, alright? First off, addressing the Aaron Rodgers rumors real quick, I do want to do that real quick. I do not think the Packers will trade him, this year. Unless he does demand a trade, then maybe they could. But if I'm Green Bay, I would not trade him either, okay? Aaron Rodgers is still an amazing player, and as long as he continues to be a really good player for this team, I would definitely stick to him. They have a small window for, with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, and they should definitely do whatever they can to capitalize on that. And so, yeah, that's really my thoughts on the Aaron Rodgers, trade rumors. But the Packers, they need to do what they can to, just improve this team and get a number 2 receiver next to Davante Adams. Now, getting to the Packers, cap situation real quick, they will only have negative $8 million in cap space. But if they were to cut Preston Smith and maybe bring him back on a cheaper deal and cut Dean Lowry and restructure Zadarius Smith and Aaron Rodgers, as well, the guy, is amazing, I do think that, quarterbacks do need to make some sacrifices to, to help make their team better. They will have $11 million in cap space. Well, using those moves, they can get around like $9 to $11 million in cap space. Of course, you got the Preston Smith, deal, assuming they could bring him back. But anyways, that's not too terrible. I mean, it's alright. But the bad thing is, they will have Corey Linsley, Lane Taylor, Robert Tonyan, and Aaron Jones as free agents. And I don't know if they will be able to bring all of them back. And I don't think they will. I don't think they will be able to bring all of them back. But if they can bring back Corey Linsley or Lane Taylor, both would be nice. But if they could bring back just one of them, plus hopefully Robert Tonyan, maybe Aaron Jones. I mean, Aaron Jones would be okay to let go of him, considering the fact that, you have the whole thing with like running backs not being like, don't overpay for them. Plus, they got AJ Dillon, who has potential. So maybe Aaron, I mean, if they can get at least a few of them back, that'd be pretty good. But getting to the free agent targets, Will Fuller and Juju Smith-Schuster, along with Curtis Samuel, could be pretty good options as number 2 receivers. I think Will Fuller or Curtis Samuel would be the best and most realistic option, at this spot. Gabe Jackson and Austin Blythe, along with Ted Karras and Austin Ryder, could be really solid options for this offensive line if they lose out on Lane Taylor and Corey Linsley. I mean, I don't think Austin Blythe or Ted Karras are on Corey Linsley's level, but they could definitely be pretty solid. Dan Arnold and Kyle Rudolph would be pretty good tight end options if Robert Tonyan does end up walking. And to help improve this pass rush, I mean, with the limited money, they can always throw some money at someone like Adam Butler, who's pretty decent. Ndamukong Suh could also be fine, but I mean, he does have that whole kicking thing, so who knows if the Packers will exactly like him for that. Shelby Harris is also a really solid player, and Kyle Van Noy is also going to be available, and I do think he would be pretty good. And so could Melvin Ingram, as while the guy is aging, he's still a really good player. And Aldon Smith, I mean, as long as the guy continues to not get in trouble off the field, I do think he can be a solid player, as he was really solid for the Cowboys this past season. But that's really all I'm gonna say for the free agents. But I do think if they do strike out on someone like a Will Fuller, they can always trade, look to the trading market. And Odell Beckham Jr. I think would be a really good option too. I mean, the guy would probably play as like a number 2, but even then, I mean, he can be a number 1 or a number 2. But I mean, Davante Adams and Odell Beckham Jr., if you can have that, why not? Why not go ahead and get that? I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., a lot of people do like characterize him as a locker room cancer. I don't know if he's exactly like that anymore. I don't think he's like that anymore. But yeah, Odell Beckham is definitely an option for this team. Luckily for them, if they cannot, get a ton of big name free agents this year, they can always look to the draft. They will own the 29th pick this year, and using that, they can always patch up some holes on the roster. Someone like a Rondale Moore or a Kadarius Toney or Terrence Marshall Jr. could be pretty good if they want to get a receiver in the draft, especially if they do strike out on those receiver free agents. But if the receiving core was fine by the end of, free agency, when the big name guys have signed, someone like Nick Bolton or Zaven Collins would be pretty good, especially if they do end up cutting Preston Smith. But that's really all I have to say for the draft targets. And to wrap up this video, the Packers must do what they can to win a championship with Aaron Rodgers. They got to get a good number 2 receiver, and they should do what they can to help improve that pass rush and build a good roster around Aaron Rodgers. But with that being said, that'll be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, as it really helps out the channel. Also, subscribe if you guys are new so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we are on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I will do a reaction to my first 2 videos ever, plus a Q&A. Also, go ahead and check out Sportsmania. The link to his channel is in the description below. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.